The freezing rain of a Bristol winter has a way of soaking right through your bones. But that night, the cold inside my chest was far worse than anything the weather could throw at me. I stood on the other side of the mahogany door I had sanded and stained with my own hands 30 years ago, shivering not from the temperature, but from the shock of the deadbolt sliding home. I could still hear her voice screaming through the wood, a sound that didn't belong in a home built on love and patience. It is a strange and terrible thing to realize that the people you would have died for are the ones killing you, slowly, day by day. If you are watching this and you have ever felt the sting of betrayal from family, please take a moment to like this video. It helps us find others who understand this pain. I stared at the brass knocker, debating whether to pound on it one last time or to accept the grim reality of my situation. I had nothing but the clothes on my back and a wallet in my pocket. To understand how a 72-year-old man ends up locked out of his own sanctuary in a thunderstorm, I have to take you back to the beginning, before the lies, before the invasion, and before I finally found my backbone. The house was a sprawling Victorian sitting on a hill overlooking the harbor. My late wife, Martha, and I had bought it as a ruin decades ago. We poured every weekend, every extra dollar, and every ounce of our energy into restoring it. It was meant to be our legacy, a place where our grandchildren would one day play hide and seek in the garden. But Martha passed away 4 years ago, and the silence in those hallways became deafening. I was lonely, yes, but I was content in the museum of memories we had built together. Then came the phone call that changed the trajectory of my twilight years. It was my son, Peterson. He had always been a gentle boy, perhaps too gentle for the cutthroat world of finance he had tried to enter. He called me late on a Tuesday, his voice cracking with a stress I hadn't heard since he was a teenager. He told me they were drowning. Rent in the city had skyrocketed, his hours had been cut, and they were looking at eviction. He asked if they could come home, just for a few months, to get back on their feet. I didn't hesitate. A father never hesitates when his child is in danger. I told him the guest wing was ready. I imagined family dinners, laughter in the kitchen, and the warmth of a full house again. I was naive. I didn't realize that when you open your door to save someone, you have to be careful not to let the wolf in along with the sheep. Peterson arrived 3 days later with a moving truck that seemed far too large for a temporary stay. With him was Elodie. I had only met my daughter-in-law a handful of times. She was sharp, fashionable, and had a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She walked into the foyer, not with the gratitude of someone being thrown a lifeline, but with the critical eye of an appraiser. She didn't say hello to me. She looked at the chandelier and muttered something about it being dated. I brushed it off. I told myself she was stressed. Financial ruin takes a toll on a marriage, and I wanted to be the safe harbor they needed. I helped them carry boxes, straining my back, while Elodie directed traffic like a site foreman. "Put that in the master," she commanded the movers. I gently corrected her, explaining that the master bedroom was mine and the guest suite was down the hall. She stopped and looked at me, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face. "Oh, right," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "I just thought, since there are 2 of us and only 1 of you, it would make more sense for us to have the larger space. But fine, the guest room will do for now." That "for now" hung in the air like a threat I chose to ignore. It was the first red flag in a parade that was about to march right over me. The first few weeks were a lesson in boundary erosion. It started with small things. My coffee mug would be moved from its usual spot. The news program I watched every morning was switched to reality TV shows that Elodie preferred. When I mentioned that I liked my routine, Peterson would pull me aside, whispering, "Dad, please. She's having a hard time adjusting. Just let her have this. It keeps the peace." I loved my son. I saw the dark circles under his eyes and the way he flinched when she raised her voice. I realized early on that he wasn't just broke. He was broken. He was terrified of her. So, I retreated. I spent more time in my study, reading books I had already read, trying to make myself smaller in a house that was 3,500 square feet. I convinced myself that patience was a virtue. I told myself that charity requires sacrifice. But there is a fine line between being generous and being a doormat. I was teaching them that my comfort didn't matter, and Elodie was a very quick learner. She began to treat me not as the host, but as a lodger who had overstayed his welcome. The shift was subtle, but it was absolute. I was losing my authority, inch by inch. By the second month, the guest dynamic had vanished entirely. Elodie stopped asking if she could change things and started doing it. I came home from a doctor's appointment to find my heavy oak dining table, the one Martha and I had celebrated 30 Thanksgivings at, pushed into the garage. In its place was a sleek glass monstrosity that looked like it belonged in a dentist's office. When I confronted her, Elodie didn't even look up from her phone. "That old thing smelled like dust," she said. "This is modern. We're updating the vibe." I looked at Peterson, pleading with my eyes for him to step in. He just rubbed the back of his neck and looked at the floor. "It does open up the room, Dad," he mumbled. If you have ever felt invisible in a room full of people, or if you have ever had your voice silenced by those who should respect you, please subscribe right now. Don't let them make you feel like you don't matter. By subscribing, you are stating that dignity has no expiration date. I walked away from that argument, my hands shaking. It wasn't about the table. It was about the erasure of my history. Every time she removed a piece of furniture, she was removing a piece of Martha. She was scrubbing the soul out of the house, and I was letting it happen because I was too afraid of causing a scene. The financial arrangement we had discussed was simple. Since they weren't paying rent, they would cover the utilities and groceries. It was a fair deal, or so I thought. But when the first utility bill arrived, it sat on the counter for weeks. When I finally asked Peterson about it, he turned red. "Elodie says we need to save every penny for our business launch," he said. "Can you cover it this month?" I covered it. I covered the next one too, and the grocery bill. Suddenly, I was supporting 3 adults on a fixed retirement income. My savings were healthy, but they weren't infinite. Meanwhile, packages from high-end clothing stores arrived daily for Elodie. She was investing in her image, she claimed. I sat them down for a family meeting. I laid out the bills. I spoke calmly but firmly. "I am happy to provide shelter," I said, "but I cannot fund a lifestyle I don't even live myself." Elodie sighed, rolling her eyes as if I were a child asking for candy. "You have plenty of money, Jacob," she said, using my first name for the first time. "You don't need it. You're old. What are you saving for? A golden coffin?" The cruelty took my breath away. Peterson just stared at the wall. Emboldened by my lack of retaliation, Elodie began to host. She invited friends over, people I didn't know, loud people who drank my wine and put their feet on my furniture. During one of these gatherings, I overheard her in the kitchen. She was holding court with a glass of Pinot Noir in her hand. "Oh, the renovations are just starting," she bragged to her friends. "Once we get full control, We're knocking down that wall and turning the old man's study into a yoga studio. He doesn't need all that space for books he can't even see properly." Her friends laughed. It was a sound that curdled my blood. She wasn't just living there, she was planning her future on my grave. She bragged about the house as if it were already hers, as if I were just a temporary obstruction to be managed until I expired. I retreated to my study, the one she wanted to destroy, and locked the door. I looked at the legal documents in my filing cabinet. The deed. The trust. I realized then that they assumed I was senile or weak. They didn't know that before I retired, I had negotiated contracts with some of the toughest developers in the state. Tensions rose with the summer heat. The air conditioning was running full blast, day and night, because Elodie couldn't think in the heat. My electric bill tripled. When I tried to adjust the thermostat, she put a lockbox over it. A plastic lockbox in my own hallway. It was absurd. It was insulting. I took a hammer from my toolbox, walked into the hallway, and smashed the plastic box to pieces. Elodie came running out of the bedroom, screaming. "You're violent! You're crazy!" she yelled. "I don't feel safe." "Then leave," I said, my voice steady. "If you are unsafe, the door is unlocked." She narrowed her eyes, her face twisting into a sneer. "We aren't going anywhere. Peterson has rights. This is his inheritance. You can't just kick family out." She was weaponizing the law, or at least her understanding of it. She thought that because Peterson was my son, they had squatters' rights or some claim to the property. She was confident, arrogant, and completely wrong. But she had managed to convince Peterson that they were untouchable. The atmosphere in the house shifted from cold to hostile. They stopped speaking to me entirely. They would cook elaborate meals and eat them in front of me without offering a bite. They occupied the living room, changing the channel if I walked in. I began to spend my days at the local library just to avoid the toxicity of my own home. One afternoon, I returned to find the door to my late wife's sewing room open. It was a room I kept closed, a shrine to her hobbies. I walked in to find Elodie packing Martha's fabrics into black trash bags. "We need this room for storage," she said, not even pausing. "This is just junk collecting dust." I grabbed her wrist. It was instinct. "Drop it," I snarled. "Do not touch her things." She yanked her arm away and screamed for Peterson. "He grabbed me. He hurt me," she wailed, squeezing out fake tears. Peterson rushed in, looking panicked. "Dad, what are you doing? You can't touch her." "She is throwing away your mother's legacy," I shouted, shaking with rage. "It's just fabric, Dad," Peterson yelled back. "Stop being so dramatic. We need space." That was the moment my heart hardened. "It's just fabric." He had forgotten who we were. He had forgotten the woman who raised him. After the sewing room incident, I started locking my bedroom door at night. I didn't trust them. I could hear them whispering in the hallway late at night. Elodie was coaching him. "He's losing it, Peterson. We need to look into power of attorney. If we can prove he's incompetent, we can take control of the assets before he spends it all or gives it to charity." I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to my son agree with her. I know, he whispered. "I'll talk to a lawyer next week." They were plotting a coup. They weren't just bad roommates. They were predators. I realized that my passivity had been interpreted as decline. They thought I was a feeble old man who could be bullied into a nursing home. I knew I had to act, but I needed to be strategic. I needed a reason that was undeniable. I needed them to cross a line that the law would recognize immediately. I began to document everything. I kept a journal of dates, times, and incidents. I recorded the insults, the stolen money from my wallet, the unauthorized changes to the house. I went to my own lawyer, a sharp woman named Sarah, who had handled my estate planning. When I told her what was happening, her face went grim. "You have to evict them, Jacob," she said. "Formally. This isn't a family dispute anymore. This is elder abuse." "I know," I said. "But I need it to be immediate. If I give them 30 days' notice, they will destroy the house. They will gut the place out of spite." Sarah nodded. "Then you need a cause for an emergency protective order. Immediate danger or violence." I didn't want violence. I prayed it wouldn't come to that. But the universe has a way of forcing your hand. The pressure in the house was like a boiler with no release valve. Elodie was getting impatient. Her business hadn't launched, the money was tight, and I was still there, breathing, taking up space in her imaginary mansion. The breaking point arrived on a Tuesday. I had cooked a pot of chili, a large batch intended to last me a few days. I left it on the stove to cool. When I came back from the restroom, Elodie was scraping the entire pot into the garbage disposal. "What are you doing?" I asked, stunned. "It smells terrible," she said. "It's stinking up the whole house. I have guests coming over." "That is my food," I said. "I paid for it. I cooked it." "And it's my nose," she shouted. "God, you are so selfish. You walk around here like you own the place." "I do own the place," I yelled back. It was the first time I had raised my voice in months. She laughed. A cold, mocking sound. "Not for long, old man. Peterson is meeting with the competency board next week. You're going to a home where you can eat all the slop you want." She had played her hand. She admitted it. They were actively trying to commit me. The betrayal was so profound, I felt dizzy. My own son was going to sign papers declaring me unfit just so he could please this woman. I retreated to the porch to cool off. The sky was turning a bruised purple. A storm was coming in off the Atlantic. The wind was whipping the trees, matching the turmoil inside me. Peterson came home an hour later. I tried to talk to him as he walked up the steps. "Peterson, we need to talk. Elodie just told me." "Not now, Dad," he snapped, pushing past me. "I've had a hell of a day. I don't want to hear your complaints about her. She's my wife. Support her or shut up." "She's trying to put me in a home, Peterson." He stopped at the door, his hand on the knob. He didn't turn around. "Maybe that's where you belong," he said quietly. "Maybe then we could finally have a life." He went inside and slammed the door. I stood there, the first drops of rain hitting my face. The umbilical cord was finally cut. The boy I raised was gone. In his place was a stranger who viewed me as a liability. The storm hit with full force around near 8 p.m. Power lines were down across the county. The house went dark. I was in the living room, lighting a candle. Elodie screamed from the kitchen. She had tripped over a chair in the dark. "Why didn't you leave the flashlights out?" she shrieked at me. "You're useless." "I didn't know the power would go out, Elodie," I said, tired. She lunged at me. It was dark, but I saw the shadow of her hand. She shoved me. I stumbled back, knocking into a side table. A vase one Martha loved crashed to the floor and shattered. "Look what you did," she screamed. "You're drunk. You're drunk and violent." "I haven't had a drop," I said. Peterson came running in with his phone flashlight. "What's going on?" "He attacked me," Elodie lied, instantly switching to victim mode. "He tried to hit me and he broke the vase. Get him out, Peterson. I don't feel safe. Get him out." Peterson turned the light on me. "Dad, seriously?" "She shoved me, Peterson." Look at the glass. I'm not doing this tonight, Peterson said, his voice shaking. You need to cool off. Go sleep in your car or something. Just get out of the house until you calm down. You can't be serious, I said. It's a nor'easter out there. I don't care, Elodie screamed. Him or me, Peterson. If he stays, I'm leaving you. That was the ultimatum. Peterson looked at me, then at the door. He grabbed my arm. Come on, Dad. Just go. Don't make me physically remove you. He dragged me to the front door. I didn't fight him. I was in shock. He opened the door, and the wind howled. He pushed me out onto the porch. Come back in the morning when you're sober, he said. I am sober, I yelled. The door slammed. The lock clicked. And that brings us back to where we started. Standing in the rain, 72 years old, betrayed by the flesh and blood I had nurtured for 40 years. I walked to my truck. I sat inside, the heater struggling against the bitter cold. I watched the windows of my house, the warm, glowing windows where they were now likely laughing at their victory. They thought they had won. They thought I was powerless. But clarity is a powerful drug. The sadness evaporated, replaced by a cold, steely resolve. I reached into my glove compartment. I didn't keep just insurance papers in there. I kept a folder Sarah had given me, just in case. It contained a notarized revocation of tenancy and a copy of the deed proving sole ownership. I picked up my phone. I didn't call Peterson. I didn't call a friend. I dialed the sheriff's department. I knew the sheriff. He was a man named Miller, who I fished with occasionally. Miller, I said when the dispatch connected me. This is Jacob. I have a domestic disturbance. I've been forcibly removed from my home by guests who have assaulted me. I am requesting an escort to re-enter, and I am pressing charges for trespassing. I waited for 20 minutes. The rain hammered the roof of the truck. I saw the blue lights before I heard the siren. 2 cruisers pulled into the driveway, cutting through the dark. Miller stepped out, looking serious. I got out and met him in the driveway, rain dripping from my nose. They threw you out in this? Miller asked, looking at the house. My son and his wife, I said. They claimed I was violent, but I have the bruised arm to prove who grabbed who. Miller nodded. Do you want them arrested? I looked at the house. I want them out, tonight. I have the paperwork right here. We walked up to the porch. Miller pounded on the door. It took a long time for it to open. When it did, Peterson was standing there, looking annoyed. Dad, I told you to wait until... He stopped when he saw the uniforms. His face went pale. Elodie appeared behind him, a glass of wine in her hand. What is this? She demanded. Why are the police here? We have a report of an illegal eviction and domestic assault, Miller said, his voice booming over the wind. He attacked me, Elodie shouted, pointing at me. We just put him outside for safety. Ma'am, Miller said, did you lock the homeowner out of his residence during a severe weather event? It's our house too, Peterson stammered. Is your name on the deed, son? Miller asked. Well, no, but I'm his heir. Then you are a guest, Miller said. And guests don't evict owners. I stepped forward. I looked Elodie in the eyes. The smugness was gone, replaced by fear. I felt a grim satisfaction as I watched the reality of the situation crash down on her, thrown out of my own house. By my son's wife, 2 hours later, the police arrived with eviction papers for her. The sentence replayed in my mind as the literal truth of the moment. I handed the folder to Miller. These are formal trespass notices, I said loud enough for them to hear. Service is immediate due to the assault. Miller looked at the papers and handed them to Peterson. You have 15 minutes to gather your essentials and vacate the property, Miller said. If you are not out, You will be arrested for criminal trespassing." "You can't do this," Elodie screamed. "Where are we supposed to go?" "That's not my concern," I said. "You have 15 minutes. The next quarter hour was a blur of chaos. Elodie threw things. She screamed curses at me that would make a sailor blush. Peterson cried. He actually cried, begging me to be reasonable. "Dad, please, we have nowhere to go. Our credit is shot." "You should have thought about that before you put your father out in a storm," I said. I stood by the door with the officers while they packed trash bags of clothes. They didn't take the furniture. They didn't take the glass table. They took what they could carry, and they were escorted to their car. As Peterson reversed down the driveway, his headlights cutting through the rain, I felt a weight lift off my chest that I hadn't realized I was carrying. Miller turned to me. "You gonna be okay here, Jacob?" "I'll be fine," I said. "Better than I've been in months." I went inside and locked the door. The house was quiet. The air smelled of Elodie's perfume, but I opened a window to let the storm blow it out. I sat in my old chair, the one I dragged back from the garage, and listened to the rain. I was alone, but I was free. They say family is everything, but that is a lie we tell ourselves to tolerate abuse. Family is respect. Family is care. If those things are absent, then all you have is a DNA connection. And that isn't enough to sustain a home. If you are holding on to a relationship that hurts you just because of blood, let this be your sign to let go. You are worthy of peace in your own home.